Hello and welcome to Bright Wings, children's books to make the heart soar. I am your host, Charity Hill. The purpose of this conversation is to help mothers and fathers identify books that will liberate their children to embrace truth, goodness, and beauty. Well, hey, welcome back to our mini-series on reading the Aeneid together. If you're listening to this, you've probably already read book 1 and book 2, so congrats. Congratulations on that. You know that as we left off, Aeneas was in the court of Dido, the queen of Carthage, and he is telling her about the fall of Troy. So as book 3 opens, Aeneas is continuing to tell his story to Dido and the people who are gathered around them. He's going to continue telling her and the reader about what happened after the fall of Troy. What did they do? Where did they go next? I'm using the Aeneid translated by Robert Fagles. So if you hear me quoting lines and quoting from the text, that's the translation I'm using. So the Aeneid translated by Robert Fagles, published by Penguin Classics. Deluxe edition has nice maps and great notes in the back, index, etc. So yay. So as we pick up with book 3, Aeneas picks up his narrative. He describes how he's landed on Thrace after escaping Troy. He's landed on Thrace and he's just about ready to sacrifice a bull in honor of the gods. And he tears up some green shoots. And something super strange happens. He discovers that as he's tearing up these shoots, human blood is pouring out of the plant. And Aeneas is pretty shaken by this. And in fact, he hears someone speaking his name. It is Polydorus, a son of Priam from Troy. Polydorus left Troy with his father's blessing. He left with gold to both protect Polydorus and to safeguard Troy's gold. And the king of Thrace ended up killing Polydorus and taking the gold and burying Polydorus in this unholy way. And so Polydorus is sprouting. So Aeneas and his men give Polydorus a fresh burial and they offer sacrifices and they sing in mourning. And I wanted to call your attention to this because it is such an odd scene. It almost doesn't fit. We don't really have we don't have a place for it so far in this narrative. But it is this extraordinary scene. And it's so extraordinary that it comes up again. It comes up in Dante Alighieri in his Divine Comedy. If you've already read the Inferno, or if you're going to read it, watch for this character, Pier della Vigna. He too sprouts spears and speaks from the midst of his branches. So this strange scene is repeated in Dante's Inferno, and he does it intentionally mirroring Virgil. It's only about 3 pages of book 3, but it's worth paying attention to because other people have paid attention to it. Okay. So Aeneas and his men and his family race away from Thrace because they're concerned that anyone who would kill someone fleeing from Troy, anyone who would kill Polydorus is untrustworthy regarding the rules and the blessings of offering hospitality. So they flee from Thrace and they go on to Delos, where they offer sacrifice and prayers to Apollo. And in these words, Aeneas prays to Apollo, "Grant us our own home, God of Thrymba. Grant us weary men some walls of our own, some sons, a city that will last. Safeguard this second Troy, this remnant left by the Greeks and cruel Achilles. Whom do we follow? Where do we go? Command us. Where do we settle now? Grant us a sign, Father, flow into our hearts." And Apollo really responds. He shakes the ground, the gates of the god Apollo's laurel tree. The entire mountain around us seemed to shake. The tripod moaned. The sacred shrine swung open. And then a voice commands them to go back to their father's land that gave you birth. It will take you back again. Search for your ancient mother. There your house, the line of Aeneas, will rule all parts of the world, your sons' sons, and all their descendants down the years. But the trouble is the people don't remember the origin of their family's roots. Where is this city? Where is the land that Apollo calls us wanderers to? Where is the land of our return? They say. And Anchises, Aeneas's father, the husband of Venus, remember. He tries to remember. And from what he can remember, he says, Crete is the land of our fathers. So they sail to Crete in book 3. But almost immediately upon arrival, they're struck with plague. What's plague? Oh, it's something Apollo sends. So after suffering under this plague of famine and sickness and their beasts die, remember, if plague comes, that comes from Apollo. So they must have gotten the prophecy wrong, right? That's what they figure out. So they go back. And Anchises finally remembers Cassandra, whose prophecies are never believed at first. He remembers, she used to tell me that we were going to go to Italy. Hesperia, it's called, Hesperia, Hesperia. So they board the ships and head out. They head out towards Italy. And en route, there's a storm. And so they land on the Strophides. Now, this isn't great because though the land is full of fat cattle, it is also the island of the Harpies. They beat off the Harpies, but they're rewarded with a curse from the Harpies. So they'd been killing the cattle that the Harpies like to eat, and the Harpies are furious. The lead Harpy, Selene, also has the power of prophecy, and she curses them, and she says, Italy is the land you seek? You call on the winds to sweep you there by sea? To Italy you will go, permitted to enter port, but never granted a city girded round by ramparts, not before some terrible hunger and your attack on us, outrageous slaughter, drive you to gnaw your platters with your teeth. And Aeneas tells the listening crowd, he tells us listeners, the blood of my comrades froze with instant dread. Their morale sank. They lost all heart for war, pressing me now to pray, to beg for peace, whether our foes are goddesses, yes, or filthy lethal birds. Then Father Anchises, stretching his hands toward the sea, cried out to the great powers, pledging them their due rights. Gods, ward off these threats. Gods, beat back disaster. Be gracious. Guard your faithful. It's like an Easter egg, ladies and gentlemen, but you will see if you keep reading how the prophecy of this harpy is fulfilled. Don't worry, it's not too bad. Other things are much worse. Then they cast off cables and sail away. They sail onward, and not too soon, about a half page later, they land on Bithrodum. And what do they discover? Here they find a mini Troy has been remade. It has been remade by a son of Priam. So he must have been Polydorus' brother or half-brother, but he's Priam's son. And who is he married to but the long-suffering and lovely Andromache? Andromache had been married to Hector, but her story is a tragic one. She has suffered so much. In fact, Aeneas first encounters her while she's pouring libations, sacrifices to the dead. She'd just been tipping wine to her husband's ashes. And when she sees Aeneas coming, the way Virgil describes it seems so true to life. Virgil writes, as she saw me coming, flanked by Trojan troops, she lost control, afraid of a wonder so extreme. Watching, rigid, suddenly warmth leaves her bones. She faints, and after a long pause, barely finds the breath to whisper, that face, it's really you? You're real? A messenger come my way? Son of the goddess, still alive? Or if the light of life has left you, where's my Hector now? Breaking off, Andromache wept. Her wailing filled the grove, inconsolable. And Aeneas responds with so much kindness. Alive, yes, still dragging out my life through the worst the world can offer. Have no doubt, what you see is real. Oh, what fate has overpowered you, robbed of such a husband. Or does fortune shine again on you, Hector's Andromache, just as you deserve? Are you still married to Pyrrhus? Eyes lowered, her voice subdued, she murmured, she was the one, the happiest one of all. Priam's virgin daughter, doomed to die at our enemy's tomb, Achilles, under the looming walls of Troy. No captive slave allotted to serve the lust of a conquering hero's bed. But I, our home in flames, was shipped over strange seas. I bowed to the high and mighty pride of Achilles' son, produced him a child in slavery. Then came to marry a Spartan bride, Hermione, granddaughter of Leda. He turned me over to Helenus, slave to slave. Then she describes how Orestes, spurred by the Furies, seized Pyrrhus quite off guard and butchered Pyrrhus at his father's altar. So, with Pyrrhus dead, part of his kingdom passes to Helenus. And then Andromache, a few lines later, asks about Ascanius, Aeneas' son, with Creusa. What of your son, Ascanius? Still alive? Still breathing the breath of life? Your son, in whom the old days at Troy... She trails off. Does he still love his mother, lost and gone? Do his father Aeneas and Uncle Hector fire his spirit with the old courage, his heroic forebear's spirit? Then Helenus comes along and gives them a good welcome. He also gives them a prophecy of where they will go, where they should sail. They're warned to take the long way around Sicily to avoid Scylla and Charybdis, the whirlpool, and the many-headed monster. That is, Charybdis is the whirlpool, and Scylla is the many-headed monster. And then they're urged in the strongest possible terms to land at Cumae, where the Sibyl of Apollo, the priestess of Apollo, where they should visit with her and receive her prophecies about their future. Helena says, quote, she will reveal to you the Italian tribes, the wars that you must fight, and the many ways to shun or shoulder each ordeal that you must meet. Revere her power, and she will grant safe passage. And then at their parting from Helenus and Andromache comes out with gifts. She just sounds, the words in her mouth sound so true and so authentic and so human. Andromache grieves no less at our final parting. She brings out robes shot through with gilded thread and a Phrygian cloak for Ascanius. Not to be outdone in kindness, weighing him down with woven gifts, she says, please take these as well, the work of my hands, reminders of me to you, dear boy, and tokens of my love, the love of Hector's Andromache that never dies. Take them, the last gifts from your own people. You are the only image of my Astyanax that's left, her son. His eyes, his hands, his features, so like yours. He would be growing up now, just your age. And Aeneas narrates, turning to leave, my tears brimmed, and I said a last farewell. Live on in your blessings. Your destiny's been won, but ours calls on us from one ordeal to the next. You've earned your rest at last. No seas to plow, no questing after Italian fields forever, receding on the horizon. He says, someday we will make our peoples one Troy in heart and soul. Let this mission challenge all our children. That's at Book 3, line 590 and following. And then this next part, I just love that Virgil did this next part, wrote this next portion in Book 3. So they already mentioned Ulysses or Odysseus, same guy, in passing. When they passed Ithaca, they said, oh, that's the place where that awful guy was born. But here around Sicily, they see Mount Etna erupting and they land. And what do they discover when they land? They find a man who was left behind by Odysseus when Odysseus escaped the Cyclops. So the poor fellow's name is Achmenides, and he is also from Ithaca, but he has so many things to say that show that Odysseus has failed him, that he stretches the pity of these Trojans who would ordinarily hate him, right? Because he's Greek and he fought against them. In fact, he wins them over. He wins their sympathy. He says, I beg you, Trojans, beg by the stars, the gods above, the clear, bright air we breathe, sail me off and away, anywhere, any land you please. That's all I want. I confess, a man from the Greek fleets. I admit I fought to seize your household gods. For that, if my crime against you is so wicked, rip me to bits and fling the bits in the sea. Plunge me into the depths. If die I must, death at the hands of men will be a joy. He just does not want to die at the hands of the Cyclops, ground up and twitching. And Achaemenides says, as I scanned the horizon, yours were the first ships that I'd seen come ashore. I throw myself on your mercy, whoever you may be. Enough for me to escape that barbarous crew. Better for you to take this wretched life, by any death you please. Then Polyphemus himself comes out upon the ridge, and he hears them, and he chases them back to the ships, and they sail away as fast as they possibly can in escape. In panic, we rush to escape to get clear of his reach and take aboard the fugitive. He had earned his way. Now, I just love that Virgil includes this scene, and it was delightful to talk to my class about why. Well, so everyone had read the Odyssey. Even if you hadn't read it, people told you about it, and it was almost everyone's favorite story. And this scene with Odysseus and his men in the cave of Polyphemus the Cyclops is one of everyone's favorite moments in the Odyssey. Odysseus sharpens and burns the point of a huge log. And then after Polyphemus has unfortunately feasted on a couple of Odysseus's men, they shove this sharpened log into his eye and escape. And then Odysseus taunts him at the end because Odysseus just can't help himself. Anyway, it's this incredibly famous scene, and it's a marvelous adventure story. One of the most famous scenes in the Odyssey. I'm sure it's one of those scenes that even children knew about because Odysseus was so sharp and so clever. And in all of Odysseus's sailings all around, trying to get back home, it's kind of a famous scene, and it's almost comic relief. And so I love that Virgil draws on all of this cultural affection and approval for this story of Odysseus. So we have Aeneas and his men sailing around, bouncing around, just like Odysseus did with his men, trying to get home, or at least trying to get to their new homeland. All of us have that longing for home, that seeking for rest, that seeking for that place of rest. We have Virgil drawing on our affection for those things that happen to Odysseus, only now his hero, Aeneas, is searching for home, sailing about. Virgil allows Aeneas to borrow all of Odysseus's glory, all the great things Odysseus did. Virgil is saying, look, our hero, our man, Aeneas did too. And in fact, he saved one of Odysseus's men that the clever Odysseus left behind. And we have the feeling that Odysseus was almost just there. We just missed him. And here comes Aeneas, setting things right, taking home the man who was left behind, who was overlooked. But Aeneas, he has care for these things. He's going to look after his men. Virgil's indicating that as much as we like Odysseus, we like that he's shrewd and clever. Aeneas is all those things, and he's careful. We might love that Odysseus is seeking his homeland and seeking to right what's gone wrong there. But we also can love Aeneas. He's just like Odysseus, but perhaps he's even better, Virgil's arguing. Of course he's better. He's Roman. He leaves things in better order, and he leaves the Cyclops without incurring the Cyclops curse, which happened to Odysseus and really set him back. So those are some of the thematic highlights from Book 3 of the Aeneid. Now let's turn to Book 4. Book 4. Dido, the tragic queen of Carthage. Book 4 of the Aeneid. Now, this is where I get a little nervous about what I'm doing here in this podcast because I'm definitely not an expert on ancient texts. I'm a high school teacher. I teach 13 texts a year, and this is one of them. So I am not an expert on the Aeneid. I am not a Latin scholar either, so I've not translated it from the text, from the Latin, as other folks have done. But the point here is not for me to be an expert, but for me to help you love this text and enter into this text. So I can't get scared, right? Because if I'm scared, you're sure to be scared. So I'm just going to help us unpack Book 4. Now, a word about this. the relationship between Dido and Aeneas is significant, and it's the tragedy of it. So, spoiler alert, the tragedy of it impacted another writer that I read with my students, Augustine of Hippo. He's really moved by the relationship between Aeneas and Dido, their desire for each other and their conflict within themselves, the conflict between private desires and loves and hopes and public duties, and the necessity of doing what's right for one's people. My students are going to read Augustine's Confessions in about 2 or 3 more books. Right now we're finishing up the Republic, and in about 2 more texts, we're going to be reading Augustine's Confessions, in which he talks about how he's moved, how he weeps. He weeps over the death of Dido. So I'm just underscoring the importance of book 4 for you, my readers. So let's get into it. So all this time, Aeneas has been telling his audience of such important moments in his life, such sufferings, such hopes, and great endeavors. So what does his audience think? So you must imagine the lovely Dido is sitting there, just hanging on his every word. And indeed, book 4 opens like this. But the queen, too long she has suffered the pain of love, hour by hour nursing the wound with her life-blood, consumed by the fire buried in her heart. The man's courage, the sheer pride of his line, they all come pressing home to her over and over. His looks, his words, they pierce her heart and cling. No peace, no rest for her body. Love will give her none. And then I love what Virgil does next. What does Dido do? She goes and talks to her sister about this man that she's in love with. So Dido praises Aeneas to her sister Anna and says, I confess it, Anna, yes, ever since my Zacchaeus, my poor husband met his fate, and my own brother shed his blood and stained our household gods. Okay, I'm sorry, it was her brother, not her uncle. And my own brother shed his blood and stained our household gods. This is the only man who's roused me deeply, swayed my wavering heart. The signs of the old flame, I know them well. I pray that the earth gape down deep enough to take me down to the Almighty Father blast me with one bolt to the shades. Before I dishonor you, my conscience, and break your laws, he's carried my love away, the man who wed me first. May he hold it tight, safeguard it in his grave. Because Dido has made a promise. She made a promise that she would not love again or marry again after Zacchaeus died. But Anna questions her, saying, well, I don't know why you made this promise. She says, Dear one, dearer than light to me, your sister. Would you waste away, grieving your youth away alone, never to know the joy of children, all the gifts of love? Do you really believe that's what the dust desires? The ghosts of their ashen tombs? Have it your way, but granted that no one tempted you in the past. And she goes on, why resist it now, this love that stirs your heart? And then Anna goes on to encourage her to find pretexts to delay Aeneas and his men and keep them longer in Carthage. And Dido says, these were the words that fanned her sister's flame. Oh, the narrator says, these were the words that fanned her sister's fire, turned her doubts to hopes, and dissolved her sense of shame. And I have in my margin an annotation in my book where I wrote, shame? Shame at remarrying? Shame at being unfaithful to her grief. So I think that's what Virgil means by shame, dissolved her sense of shame. So interesting. And then Dido does what people in love do. They look for signs. Is this meant to be? So she's examining the entrails of beasts that are sacrificed, and she's praying at shrines. Then Venus and Juno together come to an agreement of all things. Juno and Venus, I know, over this. So Juno wants to keep Aeneas in Carthage by causing the two of them to fall in love and get married. And Venus wants to use Carthage as a springboard to Aeneas, wants to keep him there and keep him safe for a while. Let him recover, rebuild ships that are broken. Venus has the long game in mind. She doesn't plan on Aeneas staying in Carthage, but she wants Juno to think that that's what she's on board with. And so Juno works to join the two of them in lasting marriage. So there's a bit of a connivance, a bit of a setup. Dido and Aeneas and their people go out hunting. There's a rainstorm. Dido and Aeneas are separated from the others, and they go into a cave, and the nymphs sing, and the wedding torches are lit, and there is a private act of intimacy in the cave. But this private act of intimacy is not a public act. And so there is this great outstanding question. My students wonder, are they really married? They're not really married. So a private act of intimacy is not a public act, and therefore it is not a marriage. No care. They don't have, as said after this, they don't care for appearances, for their public appearances, for public order. And Dido we have to understand that she's the queen. She is not a private person. She cannot be allowed to act as a simply private person. And yet she is acting as if she simply belongs to herself, and she can dispose of herself and love who she wishes without public consequence. But she's the queen. So she's already sort of at odds with her own role, her own life, if her role as queen is part of who she is as an ancient person, she's really tearing at the fabric of her own identity here. It says that this day was the first day of her death, the first of grief, the cause of it all. From now on, Dido cares no more for appearances, nor for her reputation either. She no longer thinks to keep the affair a secret. No, she calls it a marriage, using the word to cloak her sense of guilt. And though the gods are involved in their falling in love, I would hate to absolve Dido and Aeneas of agency in this. And Rumor, who is a personified goddess in this case, tells everyone even now they warm the winter long as it lasts, with obscene desire, oblivious to their kingdoms, abject thralls of lust. But Jove hears the prayers of a rival Carthaginian king, and Jove sends his son Mercury to recall Aeneas to his business. As Mercury descends from the heavens, what does he see? He sees Aeneas founding the city's fortifications and building homes in Carthage. Boy, that looks like he wants to stay. It looks like he's going to stay a long time, which means Aeneas is off mission. Mercury lashes out at once. So now you lay foundation stones for the soaring walls of Carthage. Building her a gorgeous city, doting on your wife, blind to your own realm, oblivious to your fate. What are you plotting now, wasting time in Libya? What hope misleads you so? This is around line 336. If such a glorious destiny cannot fire your spirit, at least remember Ascanius rising into his prime, the hopes you lodge in Iulus, your only heir. You owe him Italy's realm, the land of Rome. And Aeneas acts like he's just been slapped, which he sort of has been. Then Aeneas was truly overwhelmed by the vision, stunned. His hackles bristle with fear. His voice chokes in his throat. He yearns to be gone, to desert this land he loves, thunderstruck by the warnings and Jupiter's command. What can he dare say now to the queen in all her fury and win her over? Where to begin? What opening? Thoughts racing here, there, probing his options, turning out to this plan, that plan, torn in two. He tells his men, get the ships ready. I'm going to go talk to Dido. So, since Dido, who means the world to him, knows nothing, never dreaming such a powerful love could be uprooted, he will try to approach her, find the moment to break the news gently, a way to soften the blow that he must leave. The text goes on, true, but the queen, who can delude a lover, soon caught wind of a plot afoot, was the first to sense the Trojans on the move. It's so terrible. She rages in helpless frenzy, blazing through the entire city, raving like some Maenad, driven wild when the women shake the sacred emblems. She assails Aeneas before he's said a word. What follows is just an incredible verbal contest, and there's even a word for what happens between Dido and Aeneas next. The word is agon, and the history of this word is so interesting. I have to tell you about it. Agon comes from a Greek word, which becomes the root of our word agony. But it's this word agon from ancient Greece, and it really means a contest in which prizes were awarded. And you could be in a contest for any number of events: athletics, drama, music, poetry, painting, debate. And in ancient Greek drama specifically, it's a formalized debate or argumentation. In comedy, it has its own sort of mode. All right. So between Aeneas and Dido, there is an agon, a kind of formalized debate, and it's a debate about their relationship. They debate about the meaning of their love, whether they're married, what commitments they have to each other. I feel a little bad for Aeneas because he doesn't mean for things to go the way they do. He was going to tell her, but she gets to him first, and she says, "So, you traitor, you really believed you'd keep this a secret, this great outrage? Steal away in silence from my shores? Can nothing hold you back? Not our love? Not the pledge once sealed with our right hands?" Then her argument goes all over the place. She says, "Not even the thought of Dido doomed to a cruel death? Why labor to rig your fleet when the winter's wrought? To risk the deep when the north wind's closing in?" She's like, "This isn't safe. You cruel, heartless, even if you were not pursuing alien fields and unknown homes, even if ancient Troy were standing still, who'd sail for Troy across such heaving seas? You're running away from me? Oh, I pray you by these tears." Now she wants him to pity her. "By the faith in your right hand, what else have I left myself in all my pain? By our wedding vows, the marriage we began, if I deserve some decency from you now, if anything mine has ever won your heart, pity a great house about to fall, I pray you." She says, "I've done all this for you and you're going to ruin me." She says, "Thanks to you, my sense of honor is gone, my one and only pathway to the stars, the renown I once held dear. In whose hands, my guest, do you leave me here to meet my death? Guest? That's all that remains of husband now." She says, "If only you'd left me pregnant, I could have a child to remember you by." Dido has really attacked on every front that she could possibly use as leverage to keep Aeneas with her. Yet he has total clarity in his message from Jupiter that he has gotten off track and needs to get back to what he's supposed to be doing, his mission from the gods. Warned by Jupiter now, his gaze held steady. He fought to master the torment in his heart. At least he's tormented, right? At last he ventured a few words. You have done me so many kindnesses, and you could count them all. I shall never deny what you deserve, my queen, never regret my memories of Dido, not while I can recall myself and draw the breath of life. I'll state my case in a few words. I never dreamed I'd keep my flight a secret. Don't imagine that. Nor did I once extend a bridegroom's torch or enter into a marriage pact with you. If the fates had let me free to live my life, to arrange my own affairs of my own free will, Troy is the city, first of all, that I'd safeguard. Troy and all that's left of my people whom I cherish. But he's been given a different destiny. I don't belong to you, and I don't even belong to Troy, he's saying. I belong to a different destiny. He goes on to say that he has to be faithful to his father and his father's ghost, and he has to be faithful to his son and the future that's been promised his son. He says, "My father's ancient ghost warns me in dreams and fills my heart with fear. My son Ascanius, I feel the wrong I do to one so dear, robbing him of his kingdom lands in the west, his fields decreed by fate. And now the messenger of the gods, I swear it, by your life and mine, dispatched by Jove himself, has brought me firm commands through the racing winds. With my own eyes I saw him. With my own ears I drank his message in. Come, stop inflaming us both with your appeals. I set sail for Italy, all against my will." And I love Dido's response to this. This is so fantastic because she basically says, "How can the goddess of love be your mother?" She says, "No goddess was your mother. But then she kind of accepts, she realizes that she's being rejected. And so she rejects him and prays that if the just gods have any power, that he will be wrecked on the rocks in mid-sea and drink your bowl of pain to the dregs, calling out the name of Dido over and over. And worlds away, I'll hound you then with pitch black flames. And when icy death has severed my body from its breath, then my ghost will stalk you through the world. And she, in fury, just in this outburst, she flings herself away from him, sweeps out of his sight, leaving him numb with doubt, with much to fear, and much he means to say. And the scene kind of closes out, but Aeneas is driven by duty now. This is at line 295 or so. But Aeneas is driven by duty now, strongly as he longs to ease and allay her sorrow, speak to her, turn away her anguish with reassurance. Still, moaning deeply, heart shattered by his great love, in spite of all, he obeys the god's commands, and back he goes to his ships. But the narrator's voice, remarkably, further on down the page at about 515, line 515, directly addresses Dido. What did you feel then, Dido, seeing this? How deep were the groans you uttered, gazing now from the city heights to watch the broad beaches, seething with action, the bay, a chaos of outcries right before your eyes? Love, you tyrant, to what extremes won't you compel our hearts? Again, she resorts to tears, driven to move the man, or try with prayers, a suppliant kneeling, humbling her pride to passion. If die she must, she'll leave no way untried. She asks her sister Anna to go and beg Aeneas to stay just a little longer and not to rush off right now. Just stay a little longer. Give me the gift of some time, and I'll pay him back with interest when I die. Aeneas does not respond to this appeal, and Dido fixes herself on committing suicide. She hides it, though, from her sister. She tells her sister to help her gather all these things from Aeneas and put them in a big pile, and she's going to burn them all and forget him. There's a beautiful juxtaposition in the following lines between justice and injustice, balance and imbalance. So Dido is standing before the altar, holding the sacred grain, a grain of offering, of sacrifice, in reverent hands, with one foot free of its sandal, robes unbound. Sworn now to die, she calls on the gods to witness, calls on the stars who knew her approaching fate, and then to any power above, mindful, even-handed, who watches over lovers bound by unequal passion, Dido says her prayers. So powers above that are even-handed, that watch over lovers who are bound unequally by passion for each other, unequal passions for each other. I love that juxtaposition of even-handed gods watching over those who are unevenly matched. Before Dido dies, she repents that she broke faith, that she broke the faith she swore to the ashes of her first husband. But really, she also kind of goes quite mad with passion, saying that she wished she'd ripped Aeneas and his men and his father to pieces and scattered them in the sea, slashed his men with steel, butchered Ascanius and fed him to his father at a feast. These were horrible things horrible things that were depicted as having happened in the tragedies of Aeschylus. If you have read the 3 plays ever of the Oresteia and you hear about the house of Atreus, the tragedies associated with the family line of Agamemnon and his brother, then Menelaus. Menelaus kind of escapes, but it's Agamemnon and his father and grandfather. Very terrible things, including some cannibalism by family members, committed by family members to father and son pairs. So Virgil is drawing on things that have happened already in Greek tragedy that the Romans might be aware of. And he's putting some of these allusions into the furious mouth of the heartbroken Queen of Carthage. Dido, in tears, delays for a moment, looking at the relics of Aeneas' clothing and, quote, the bed they knew by heart. She lays down and speaks her final words. "Oh, dear relics, dear as long as fate and the gods allowed, receive my spirit and set me free from pain. I've lived a life. I've journeyed through the course that fortune charted for me, and now I pass to the world below, my ghost in all its glory. I have founded a noble city, seen my ramparts rise. I have avenged my husband, punished my blood brother, our mortal foe. Happy, all happy too, I would have been, if only the Trojan keels had never grazed our coast. I shall die unavenged, but die I will. So, I rejoice to make my way among the shades. And may that heartless Dardan far at sea drink down deep this sight of our fires here and bear with him this omen of our death. And she stabs herself with a sword that Aeneas has left behind. And her sister, her poor sister Anna, finds her. Poor Anna's reaction. Was it all for this, my sister? You deceived me all along? Was this what your pyre meant for me? This your fires, this your altars? You deserted me. What shall I grieve for first? Your friend? Your sister? You scorn me now in death? How very cruel, when you lay down to die. You have destroyed your life, my sister, mine too, your people, the lords of Sidon, and your new city here. Please, help me to bathe her wounds in water now, and if any last lingering breath still hovers, let me catch it on my lips. And then Virgil says some of the most interesting words in the Aeneid. He writes of Dido, since she was dying a death not fated or deserved, no, tormented before her day in a blaze of passion. Proserpina had yet to pluck a golden lock from her head and commit her life to the Styx and the dark world below. So Iris, glistening dew, comes skimming down from the sky on gilded wings, trailing showers of iridescence, shimmering into the sun, and hovering over Dido's head declares, so commanded, I take this lock as a sacred gift to the god of death, and I release you from your body. With that, she cut the lock with her hand, and all at once the warmth slipped away, the life dissolved in the winds. To me, that is a fascinating passage because it isn't as if the concept of fate is straightforward or clear or consistent. It is terribly inconsistent. And the reason we know that is that though Aeneas must pursue his fate, and there's no way that he could stay in Carthage, and the gods even get behind making sure that making sure that Aeneas gets back on his way, Dido is somehow able to die a death not fated or deserved. So it isn't as if fate controls every detail. It's not as if human agency doesn't matter, because it surely does. Look at what Dido has done. With the Aeneid, I'm not sure if fate is a backwards look at what happened and a kind of description of the inevitability of how that seemed to happen, how it had to happen, because it did happen. Surely it's clear that not every detail is fated. But even the gods themselves are subject to fate. Had a student argue that the more important a character you were, the more subject to fate you are, rather than the less. But I think that's tricky because Dido is a pretty important character, and yet her death is not fated, while the deaths of some wonderful but seemingly more minor warriors are fated. Again, I think fate is not a consistent concept. Something else I wonder if Aeneas would have been a hero had he remained in Carthage. I wonder, is he an irresponsible lover, even if he is a hero? Or was he being irresponsible by being a lover? What we certainly see is that Aeneas prioritizes the good of his people, the good of the people of Rome, the good of Ascanius and his father, above and beyond his own private happiness, his own personal fulfillment. The text is clear that he loves Dido and that he is heartbroken at leaving her, but nevertheless, he is duty-bound Aeneas, and he's choosing the public good over his private flourishing. There's austerity in that, and there is some heroism in that. I hope you have enjoyed reflecting on books 3 and 4 of Virgil's Aeneid with me. I want this podcast to turn you back toward the text. So don't be scared. Carpe Librum.